list all the state monopolies we're acquainted with. We could be here till midnight and the list would not be finished. But how many private monopolies that are not supported by the state can you actually list? I can't think of any.
The thing is, the question...
Windows would be a bad example. I did hear it, yes.
The question is that what if we let this to the free market, things important such as healthcare and food, water, how if there are people deprived of this because they can't, what if there is a monopoly?
Sure. Okay, I'll give you an example. Canada. Until very recently, it was illegal for doctors to offer private healthcare services in Canada. So what is the consequence of a Canadian monopolized healthcare system? The consequence is waiting lists that go on forever. If you want to get a magnetic resonance imaging scan in Canada, there are more MRI machines in Cleveland, Ohio than in the entire country of Canada. Right? So where do you do if you want life-saving medical technology in Canada? You go to the US. That's what you do. Because the Canadian system has to ration. All systems of scarce resources ration. Right? You can't satisfy all the needs at any given price, at zero price. So you need to ration them. Who is going to get the service and who isn't? When are they going to get it? Who's first and who's second? If you have a political allocation system, normally it's determined by politics. The Prime Minister does not get in a long queue for 8 months, trust me, or the Prime Minister's wife, or anyone important and powerful. But the average bus driver or someone like that is the last person on the queue. And the consequence is they don't get it. So by the time you finally get your MRI, you're already dead of brain cancer. Right? Because you're on a waiting list. They have to allocate rationing in some way. In contrast, if you allow the market, you have an incentive to produce more and higher quality because the only way to make money is by satisfying customers. Here's a very concrete example. In Toronto, there was no MRI machine. National Health Service wouldn't buy it. They said, not important enough. Which is a little crazy if you're a person of a certain age worried about brain cancer or other forms of cancer. A group of private business people bought one at their own expense. They raised the money as a charity to buy it, installed it in the main hospital. The state said, okay, it will work for 8 hours a day. But an MRI machine can run 24 hours a day. But they said, well, we're the state, and we're doing it for 8 hours a day. We have one shift. They said, we'll raise the money to pay 2 more shifts. So you work from 8 to 5, and then from 5 to 1, and then from 1 to 8. Does that work out mathematically? I think. So you go around the clock, and they said no. Why? They had no incentive. No one is going to make more money, frankly. And this is a case where the profit motive, not in the religious sense of the prophet, but in the financial sense of profits, the profit motive moves people to deliver more services. But these bureaucrats, I'm sure they're nice people, they had no incentive, no reason. No one is going to make more money and get an advancement by running the MRI machine 24 hours a day. But again, an MRI machine can work all day long. There's no reason to let it rest. It doesn't get tired. So instead of being able to, when I was sick, I got an MRI. I have bad headaches, and they were worried about cancer. By the way, if your doctor ever says, we'd like to run more tests and just see what happens, what it means is, we think you have cancer. And I said, does that mean you think I have cancer? And she said, it's one of the things we're interested in. Which means yes. It turns out I did not have it, so I was very fortunate. But I got the MRI that day. We called around. We went to a whole bunch of different private companies. We found one at a price, and I did it at 3 o'clock in the morning. A little inconvenient, but better that than 8 months later, which is what happens in Canada, by which time you're dead. So the profit motive in that way, having multiple providers, is much better for life-saving technology. I would much rather have the market than Canadian health system any day.
What about the Cuba health system? Maybe the health system in Cuba
Go to Cuba someday.
Yeah, what is your opinion on that? Because I've heard that
It's horrifying.
it's horrifying.
It's absolutely horrifying. I have a friend actually, and she's a very dear friend of mine. We have not agreed much on politics. She was kind of a communist, and but she's a sweet person. Just had a certain blindness, and she went to Cuba with some friends. She said, "I want to go to Cuba." She speaks Spanish. She went off the official tour. She wrote back to me and she said, "I cannot believe people live like this. These so-called hospitals are so filthy. Dried blood on the floor, unbelievably bad medical care, just primitive, absolutely primitive." And it's not an accident that over 40% of the population of Cuba has applied for exit visas. So just imagine. And the rest of the population would, but they're afraid. Virtually everyone in Cuba would leave if they had the opportunity, including the ones who come to the rallies for Castro. They do it because you're ordered to, and if you don't, you're afraid. The Cuban medical system is not anything you would want to write home about. You would not want to emulate that.
Can we open it?
Yeah.
Before
How do you compare it with the British system, the
National Health Service in Britain.
compared to the American? Because you said just now, you call when you share your own experience, you able to pay for the MRI service. How about the poor people who are not able to pay for the service?
Let them die.
But they don't get it in Canada either. I mean, that's one thing to remember. We're comparing two different systems. One, you don't get it. The other one, you have a greater chance of getting it. And the fact is, if there are more MRI machines working 24 hours a day, more people can get MRIs. Just it's simple arithmetic. It's not about economics. It's just addition. And in countries where people have an incentive to produce MRIs, you get more MRIs. As I said, it's fairly simple arithmetic. You don't have to be a deep thinker to work that out. It's when people have an incentive to produce medical care, you'll get more medical care. When there's more of something, the price goes down, right? So we do simple supply and demand, right? If the supply curve shifts outward, the price is going to fall. So you want to ask, what incentive is there to produce more supply of things that people want? And being able to make money is a very good way to do it. Think about, so I'll mention very quickly the National Health Service. I did live in Britain. It's a lovely country. I love Britain. I like English people. Hate the food, but people are nice. I did not have good experience with National Health Service. And one of the reasons was they are astonishingly indifferent to suffering. The NHS produces pretty good service on terms of routine medical care. It's not so bad. You break a bone, fall out of a tree, it's okay. If you suffer life-threatening illness, get out of Britain. Just get out. It's terrible. They have very, very bad record on things like lung cancer, all kinds of cancer, basically anything that's life-threatening. They do not do very well at. And one of the reasons is that they make a political calculation. It's relatively late in your life, and they make a calculation. Your life isn't worth very much, and you do not get allocated medical care. Right? Because remember, any scarce resource has to be rationed one way or another. And when it's political, they sit down, they're nice people, they're not wicked or evil, but they say, so, Lang, how old are you?
23.
He's 23, okay? He's got more life in him than I do. So they say, Ling, we're going to spend some money on you. Tom, you're 51. Right? You're like finished. Okay? Tick, 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 tick. It's over. I'm way behind on the list, except being an articulate person with a doctorate from Oxford University. I know how to get to the front of the list because I'm smart and articulate and aggressive. But if I'm a bus driver who went to 9 years of school, didn't do O-level,